guys. Appreciate it.
Okay, next up. Okay, so I have the great honor of introducing Diane Bailey of Menlo Park, who has been his commission for the 5 books that have been written by Redwood Energy and the whole team about how to electrify different building types. So applaud her vision of being an early adopter in so many different ways. Here we go. Diane Bailey is the executive director at Menlo Park, a community nonprofit aiming to help the city of Menlo Park and the region become carbon neutral. She also leads the campaign for fossil-free buildings in Silicon Valley. Previously, Diane worked at the Natural Resources Defense Council, the Citizens for a Better Environment in Chicago, and a local transportation planning agency in Houston. She is a certified climate change professional and holds a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from Washington University and a master's degree in environmental engineering from Rice University. Diane.
Wow, thank you, Sean. What a nice introduction and what an honor to be here. Can you guys hear me okay?
You're perfect.
Great. Okay, I'm going to attempt to share my screen. We'll see how this goes. Give me just 1 second. All right. Can you guys see this?
Yes, we can see it. It's going into presenter mode.
Excellent. Let me get it into presenter mode.
And if you
can get it to respond. There it goes.
Hopefully you're going to point out that you've been directly involved in like 20 of these, 40, something like that. Like just so everyone knows, Dan has just been an incredibly powerful leader in the whole Bay Area in getting these decarbonization codes passed. So please take it away.
Thank you, Sean. You're too kind. Well, it's a really large team here in the Bay Area working on these issues, and I'm not going to be able to acknowledge everyone, but I do want to note that it's a lot of people working on this. So Sean, thank you so much, and thanks to the crew to Redwood Energy for putting this together. It's kind of neat to see an all-women retreat in honor of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. This is one of my favorite quotes from her, that real change, enduring change, happens one step at a time. So everyone take a deep breath. But we, of course, have to accelerate our steps because we are in a climate crisis. So first, a little bit about Menlo Park. We're a very small community group with very large ambitions to bring about a zero carbon city for Menlo Park and also accelerate a transition to a zero carbon economy throughout Silicon Valley and to spread the zero carbon work to other cities. I don't think any of you need reminding that we're in a climate crisis, but I think it's always good to revisit why we're doing this work. It's important from an equity standpoint and social justice and health and all of those things, but also we are running out of time to stem climate change, and ending our use of fossil fuels would be a very good step to addressing climate issues. Okay, so getting to the subject at hand, what is the Bay Area doing to eliminate fossil fuel use in our homes and buildings? What are the actions that we're taking? Well, there have been a lot of REACH codes over the past few years, and I want to note that I'm talking to you from the tiny hamlet of Belmont, which is mid-peninsula between San Francisco and San Jose, and that's my worldview. And so I'm less familiar with the great work going on in East Bay and North Bay. I'm going to try to acknowledge some of those programs, but really might focus on Silicon Valley and some of the work going on with our campaign here. So most of you know that the city of Berkeley kicked off a lot of the work in July of 2019 by banning gas. But there are also a lot of other programs I want to talk to you about that are going on in the Bay Area that provide incentives and pilots and some really important community choice energy support programs that have been growing over the past few years. And also some of our strategies about how we advance these programs from the voluntary realm to mandatory. All right, so a couple of years ago, we launched the campaign for fossil-free buildings in Silicon Valley. And at the same time that Berkeley was plotting how to devise their gas ban, there was a lot of work going on around the Bay Area on this other approach of REACH codes as a viable way to electrify new construction. And at the beginning of 2019, there was a really important legal memo that came out that kind of elaborated on that strategy. And told us all, it kind of gave a green light that we could go ahead with REACH codes, and that could be really effective and good solid ground for local cities to work on. And so a number of us came together in March of 2019 to start this. It was kind of a ragtag team of local folks to start this campaign, thinking maybe we could get one, maybe two cities to adopt a REACH code, and or maybe talk about, you know, city resolutions on electrifying buildings. We joined together under the common goal to accelerate a phase out of fossil fuels from all buildings throughout Silicon Valley, and decided to start with new construction with the hope towards getting at existing homes and buildings later. So far, we're 35 member groups, and I put our website there in case you want to visit us and find out a little more. So in our first year in 2019, we were really proud that 11 cities in Silicon Valley, that's San Mateo County and Santa Clara County, 11 cities took actions, and these ranged from incentive-based REACH codes to full-on gas bans. When we started, the first city that took action in our area was San Mateo, and their REACH code was so weak that we started to question if this was the right path at all or worth anyone's time. That REACH code didn't cover multifamily. It was based on really weak incentives, just mild. We didn't think it would change the status quo or move developers to build electric. And then directly after them, San Jose developed a similar REACH code. It did include multifamily, but it had very weak incentives. So we were worried that this was not the right path and it's kind of wasting people's time. Well, San Jose quickly turned that around, and the mayor stepped up with a commitment to include a gas ban in the future, which they followed up with in October of that year, banning gas from homes and small apartment buildings, and also municipal development. So that was a great first step. But then one thing that was noteworthy in September of 2019 is that Menlo Park took a different approach. They decided to require all electric within a REACH code. And this hadn't been done before. It wasn't envisioned in the initial legal strategy. There were a lot of questions about it. Would they get sued? Would anyone go for it? But the city stuck to this approach as a streamlined way to get their planning and development staff on board. And eventually it did become the preferred approach that was suggested by Peninsula Clean Energy and Silicon Valley Clean Energy as the way to go for the REACH codes. So that was really exciting that Menlo Park was able to test that out. And once they adopted it, 8 other cities quickly followed. And then by 2020, we had 21 cities, or 20 cities in the county of San Mateo, actually, that adopted REACH codes and gas bans throughout Silicon Valley. So it became kind of an epicenter, or the Bay Area is really the epicenter with 36 REACH codes. And I don't have the same updated graphic here for the Bay Area, but you can imagine a crowd of logos. So this is really the majority of the actions in the state, and we're hoping that this will start spreading a little faster this year as people realize that you can actually save money by building all electric and new construction. And I want to note that most of these REACH codes, I don't have a breakdown, but most of these city codes are all electric required, as opposed to the weaker incentive based. So that's great progress in new construction. And last year we decided as a campaign and a coalition to kind of shift our thinking and really start to focus more on existing buildings, continuing to support REACH codes, and we still continue to do that this year in 2021. But we realized that we needed to focus a lot more on equity and community outreach and begin to develop the financing and other support programs to begin to develop mandatory strategies to require or phase out gas in existing homes and buildings. So our outreach really started with affordable housing groups. And in this photo, you see Sean Armstrong. He came down, this was June of 2019, came down and did a lunch and learn together with the Housing Leadership Council of San Mateo, and kicked off a really great discussion where we got into some of the barriers and perceived threats that some affordable housing developers have, and real challenges that they're facing to build all electric. There was some surveying that was done, And since then, I'm really happy to report that some of the community choice energy agencies have started roundtables and started direct technical help for affordable housing developers. And they might be better messengers than advocates like me um, to reach affordable housing developers. But our partnership with the Housing Leadership Council continues, and with some affordable housing developers, we do plan, once the pandemic kind of fades, we do plan to have some tours of electric affordable housing developments that exist to help people see it for real as opposed to in photos. And of course, the guidebooks with Sean and Redwood Energy have been extremely helpful in illustrating some of these examples, and those continue to circulate. Okay, well, community choice energy agencies, I already mentioned them. They have really been instrumental in expanding electrification programs around the Bay. I'm just going to focus on a handful that I'm most familiar with. They have developed programs on equity, on funding and financing, bolstering outreach and education, and they're starting to get into market development, which is exciting. Silicon Valley Clean Energy probably has the strongest building electrification program. They adopted a joint action plan that's really detailed late last year, and that defines 6 cornerstone actions to reduce carbon pollution from buildings, both new and existing. They are doubling down on REACH codes with the 2.0 initiative. They're looking at the feasibility of phasing out natural gas entirely by 2045 and what that entails. They're looking at supporting local policies to decarbonize existing buildings, and I'll get into that a little more in a minute. Helping homeowners a little more with the Future Fit program, and also developing financing tools like on-bill financing, and particularly focusing on the low-income segment to help them access that financing. And then the last thing they're trying to do is become the regional leader and really offer a coordinated and unified approach to building decarbonization throughout the Bay. They just allocated $6 million to these programs for the next few years, which is great because we know that the recent exit fee increase, or PCIA increases, put some stress on CCA budgets. I also want to point out their eHub resources. They already have some really great online tools for homeowners to help them go electric, and I'd encourage folks to check that out. Peninsula Clean Energy has a similar suite of tools, if a little bit further behind, but they did initiate this technical assistance service. They have a website dedicated to that. That's the photo on the left. And they've begun doing a lot of roundtables and free assistance to builders and developers and design folks. And they've also started doing some contractor trainings. For existing buildings, they just recently beefed up their incentive programs in collaboration with BayREN. I'll talk about BayREN in a moment. Most interestingly, they have a new program based on an earlier pilot to help low-income folks, mainly care customers. It's a turnkey electrification program where care customers that enroll get a full electrification and energy upgrade to their homes. And it's all managed by one contractor, so no headaches for the homeowners. And it's up to $8,000 per home, I think. And then the last thing I want to mention is a technology pilot with Harvest Thermal to streamline heat pump heating and water heating through a single device. And that's going to be starting soon. Sonoma Clean Power might have one of the most innovative programs with our new on-bill financing program that I hope will come online this spring. They're just workshopping it now. They're offering $10,000 per customer to do electrification upgrades. And together with their on-bill financing, they're also going to have a demonstration site in Santa Rosa, their Advanced Energy Center, which will be downtown. And that'll be a space where people can walk up and see some of the technologies and test it out and ask questions to an expert. So that's really exciting. BayREN is the regional energy organization. Until recently, they've been focused most on efficiency upgrades, but they just recently launched an electrification program for single and multifamily homes, and they focus on 4 different areas: heating, water heating, cooking, and dryers. And they're also working directly with PG&E to do contractor trainings, and those are now available on demand for free. And so any city could access those and request the service for their staff. and it's free to contractors and builders as well. So that's a lot about incentives and some really nice support programs, and those are all really nice. But a lot of us in Silicon Valley have been converging around the idea that mandates are really critical to moving the bar in terms of phasing out fossil gas use. We just can't achieve a full phase out of fossil gas on goodwill alone. And so while we're creating these necessary support programs that I talked about, looking at equity and financing and technical support, these are all great carrots, but we need to start creating mandatory standards or sticks to phase out gas. And excuse me, the local programs that we're working on here in the Bay Area and the standards can really form a strong foundation for state action in the future. That's our goal, is for them to scale upwards from local cities to the region to the state. So there are 3 mandatory programs happening right now in the Bay Area that I want to talk about. I'm going to do a time check here. How am I doing, Sean? A couple minutes? Okay.
I think that you get to go till 2:30, right? That's when Kalina is starting. So you're only halfway.
Great, thank you. So one of the mandatory measures that I'm most excited about is happening in Menlo Park. And we're calling it Replace on Burnout, but some folks are kind of debating about the name. In any case, back in July of last year, the city of Menlo Park adopted a new climate action plan, and it had a very bold goal to help the city become zero carbon by 2030. And it included 6 key measures to start with. The initial vision was more than 50 measures, I think, but when the pandemic hit, the city was really kind of forced to scale that back a little bit. I also want to note that this climate action plan and the vision, including Replace on Burnout, was primarily written and originated from the Environmental Quality Commission of the city. So that was sort of a novel approach. There were several commissioners, Josie Gaylord and Tom Cabot, who really spearheaded this, and they deserve a lot of credit for it. So thanks to their good work, the #1 measure in this plan was a commitment to electrify 95% of homes and buildings by 2030.
Woo!
And yeah, it's quite ambitious, and it's never been done before that we know of. We're still looking for examples, but it needs to be done. We know it needs to be done. And so we're all kind of scrambling and working hard to figure out, well, what does that look like? And fortunately, this was proposed as a city priority for 2021. That remains to be finalized, but it's good to see that on the priority list because it means staffing and funding. So initially, I included a slide here from the city of Menlo Park. This is from a presentation they did last October. They were looking at 5 or 6 different ways to accomplish this goal, the 95% conversion. But the burnout ordinance, the one on the top, has really emerged as the most impactful and effective approach in our view. And we think that development is going to be starting in earnest now. There's been a lot of discussion to date. The city has hired a building official on contract to help advise the process, kind of lined up staffing and a plan. So we hope to see that roll out soon, and including a robust public input process. Fortunately, as well, there's some legal research that's been done to explore what is the municipal authority to do measures like Replace on Burnout. And it appears from the first round of results that the legal authority is really solid. And it's also very clear cut and simple. And so that's great news. It's sort of similar to the legal theory behind Berkeley's gas ban using police powers. We hope that the city will accept this and move forward with it. It'll be, an ongoing debate over the coming months. But you also heard from Josie Gaylord yesterday about some modeling that she's done together with the Environmental Quality Commission to figure out, well, what are the economics behind this measure? And so that work will continue over the next few months to figure out how can we do a Replace on Burnout ordinance in Menlo Park without really hampering, especially low-income homes, but without causing severe economic pain. And with that comes political blowback. So we're going to be looking closely at how we mitigate that and keep the costs down and really focus funding and assistance for low-income homeowners. At the same time, Berkeley, unsurprisingly, is looking at their own building electrification plan. I'm less familiar with this, so I'm just going to share what's been reported recently from the team of folks working on this. Rocky Mountain Institute has been helping, as well as Rinkin Consulting, and I think also the Ecology Center, working closely with city staff. And their process looks a little different. It's focused on equity, and they've been doing substantial outreach to the community. And this has uncovered some pretty serious concerns about the cost, and also arrived at the conclusion that any extra cost to electrification of existing buildings would be a barrier and make a policy a non-starter. So they have a lot of work to do to figure out how to get sufficient programs in place before they do any mandatory requirements or standards to keep all the homeowners whole as they go to replace their heaters and appliances. They're looking at 4 main strategies. They're evaluating time of replacement, that's similar to Menlo Park's Replace on Burnout. They're looking at time of sale, and Berkeley already has a time of sale ordinance around energy efficiency, so this could be a natural next step. They're looking at building performance standards. This could look similar to New York City's performance standards, for example. And they're also looking at whole neighborhood electrification projects. They will be starting some pilots first to test out some of these ideas, and they'll be looking to complete those pilots and get the financing and the economics in better shape before they entertain any mandatory solutions. And they'll have a draft of their report out to share with the public in April, we think. The third mandatory approach I want to tell you about is at the Air District. The Bay Area Air District has water heater and furnace standards for NOx emissions. And a lot of folks are looking at these emission standards thinking that they have very clear Clean Air Act authority to improve these emission standards and go all the way to zero emissions. And if air districts adopt zero emission standards for these heaters and appliances, it would effectively be an electric requirement. It's not clear that there's a control device out there that can make a natural gas furnace or water heater zero emissions. So our goal is to get the emission standards down to zero or close enough to zero that it would effectively require electric equipment or zero carbon or zero emissions equipment. And right now there's a lot of advocacy work aimed at getting the Air District to consider all gas burning devices inside homes, not just water heaters and furnaces. That is a heavy lift. We know that their legal folks are opposed to it. We think that their concerns are kind of not rooted in reality. The Air District absolutely has the authority to regulate stoves, dryers, fireplaces, and they have regulated fireplaces in the past. So that's an interesting note. We think that if several air districts can adopt these standards, that it can move the whole state to go to all electric appliances and kind of sunset the sale of gas appliances. And at the same time, there's exploration of possible legislation to do that. But we think politically, we might need to have existing examples of an air district or some other regional approach before it can go statewide. The Bay Area Air District is probably the most advanced in terms of the air districts looking at this. Interestingly, the South Coast and the San Joaquin air districts have tougher NOx emission standards right now on their heaters and water heaters. They have ultra low NOx standards, but those have not really created the shift that we need from gas devices to electric, unfortunately. And the politics in those areas right now are such that the Bay Area might be able to move a little faster. So a number of groups have come together to work on the air district standards, and we hope that this coalition will grow over time. We are approaching this from a standpoint of public health, and there's growing concern among air district board members as they catch on to the health impacts of burning gas inside our homes. This is a graphic that an intern made for us to show, kind of help people visualize what we're all exposed to by using gas in our homes. And I know you heard a lot about the health impacts yesterday. So I won't go into detail about this, but this is just to note that the advocacy is really ramping up at the Air District, and We've done, I think, probably almost a dozen board member meetings so far. They've all been very positive and supportive. The biggest stumbling block with the Air District is equity and economics, no surprise, which are related. Virtually all of the board members that we've spoken with are worried about potential increases in cost. They envision terrible scenarios of someone trying to replace their gas furnace in the winter and being prevented to do so, and being, freezing, trying to get the finances together to get an electric heater. I think none of us want to see that outcome, and we all want to see the assistance that's necessary in place. But at the same time, these standards could take several years to phase in. And so we kind of have to build the plane while we're flying it. We need to be working on the financing and the assistance to low-income homeowners while we're working on the standards, knowing that we'll have a couple of years to get these programs right, and to scale them to the whole 9-county region. Just looking at my notes. Okay, there are a couple of slides that I don't have, but a couple of updates that I want to share. Bear with me. So one is resilience. We haven't really emphasized a lot on resilience to date, but as cooler climate areas like the Bay Area start grappling with the impacts of climate change, building electrification is one way. As people replace gas furnaces with electric heaters, they get air conditioning together with that. And so that is one thing that we want to start emphasizing with the Air District, and with the city of Menlo Park, as well as we start to advocate for these mandatory approaches that, in fact, if we do nothing, there will be equity impacts to folks who will be needing air conditioning and not really have a good way to get it. I also want to note that we have a new contingent of Bay Area legislators who are really wanting to push the envelope on climate and really run some high impact climate bills, and specifically on building electrification. We know that Senators Cortese and Becker have some really excellent building electrification bills that they kind of hit the ground running with. They put those out immediately, and they're pretty serious about pushing the envelope at the state level on building electrification. So we have a lot of great allies and a lot of opportunity to take the efforts in the Bay Area and scale those to the state level. And I want to also note about the lawsuits against the REACH codes. Could those put a chill on some of our building electrification work locally? I think there are 3 lawsuits, potentially more, in the Bay Area against Berkeley's gas ban, on Windsor and Santa Rosa's REACH codes. And the upshot is that the legal footing of those cities is very strong, and we're confident that the cities will prevail in court. Unfortunately, the city of Windsor didn't have the finances to fight their lawsuit, and so they rescinded their REACH code. And that's sad, but at the same time, the lawsuit against Santa Rosa was similar, and we know that that city will prevail. And so once that is cleared, Windsor can go back, and I think at this point they're entertaining a gas ban this time, or something stronger. We know that city leaders in Windsor are ready to act on building electrification once the legal issues clear. So that's, might not be evident, but there is good news there. And lastly, I want to say thank you. It's quite a large team of folks working in the Bay Area on phasing out fossil fuels, and we're not trying to say that this is easy work or that this can happen overnight, but we know that we need to get it done, and we need to ramp up our actions, really accelerate them. And we know that we're going to have to collaborate and get a little more organized this year to really ramp up some of the city and the local efforts to be more regional. And a lot of folks are working to do that right now. I can't emphasize the equity issue enough. It really needs to be front and center in our work. And we have a whole lot of work ahead of us to reach out to environmental justice and community organizations to hear their concerns and really work with them to fine-tune the strategies so that these strategies work in disadvantaged communities and for low-income homeowners. And at the end of the day, it's really climate justice at the center of climate action, and we just need to be clear about that and stay focused on that. So I want to thank you. This is my contact information if you want to stay in touch. And the website for our campaign, fossilfreebuildings.org, is on there as well. And at this point, I'd be happy to take any of your questions, and thank you very much.